And it is a big, big hello. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon from wherever you may be watching. And welcome to the Masterclass series. Thank you so, so much. One, for being online, if you're online with us now, but for many of you that will watch this Masterclass afterwards, thank you so much for making the time. As always, I'm Nozipho Shabalala. And as always, I have someone with me that I respect deeply, that I admire, who I feel is a leader in their space, and who I think has something to share with us to help us really decode their leadership philosophy, but more importantly, really get to grips with their leadership practice. So none other than Eleni Giokos is with us. Eleni, thank you, joining us all the way from Dubai today. Thank you for being here.
Hello, everyone. So excited to be with you. Hello to everyone from all corners of the world. I'm so elated, but you also spoke me up a lot. Now I've got to meet those targets you set out. So thank you.
I mean, it is the Eleni Giokos, and you know, for many people who probably see you on CNN, what I really hope to bring to them in this conversation is the girl that I met in Joburg, and who has just been an absolute sister. The person I bump into on different stages across the continent, across the world, who always goes out of her way to say, my sister's here, let's connect, let's have a drink, who never says that she doesn't have time for anyone from home. And that's who I've known you to be. So in the way we're going to start today, I want to get a few more people closer to you, as close to you as I think I am. And I'm going to first start off by saying, if you're online, give us a shout out. Tell us where you are. Which part of the world are you joining from? Give a shout out to your city. Give a shout out to your country. We definitely want to know where you're joining us from. But Eleni, I'm going to kick off with some firecracker questions.
Tough questions.
I don't want you to think about it. I don't want you to take it too seriously. The first answer that comes. So, yeah. What's the nickname that you wish nobody actually knew about? Is there a nickname, whether somebody close to your family, friends that have used, what do they call you that probably the many millions of people who watch you on CNN would probably never know about?
You know what? I did some research because that's what all good journalists do. So when I knew this was coming, I phoned everyone. So the one thing they call me is the hurricane or the tsunami.
Oh, I can see that.
Yeah, because I just come in and I just I rip things up.
I know, I can definitely see that, the hurricane or the tsunami. I know you have a sister who's absolutely just as gorgeous and just as sweet and just as kind, Heidi, who's also on television. But when Heidi is skinnering, and for non-South Africans, that means gossiping. When Heidi's gossiping about you, what do you think she's saying about you to her friends?
You know, again, I phoned her about this actually just before I came on, and she's like, Eleni, I don't talk about you. I'm like, don't talk, cuck. Of course you talk about it. And then she says, okay, there's one thing that bothers us is that you don't let us speak. You just talk.
I can see how that can be a problem.
Yeah, but you see, they need to listen because Heidi's 10 years younger, so I must talk and she must listen.
Oh, but she's just so awesome. Listen, as a firstborn, it's a birthright. And I know people have gone and decided to name it all sorts of other things, but it's a birthright. Okay, I'm gonna pull one more on you. In a party setting, who's Eleni? Are you the dancer? Are you the singer? Or are you the bar lady?
Okay, this is a really difficult one because I am very versatile, and I'm versatile at work and I'm versatile in party situations. I will first serve everyone drinks. I will play the music while I'm serving everyone drinks, and then I'll be dancing on the bar. So I'm all three. I'm everyone. I'm all of those. And I was a lady at one time in my life, so I've got this. And I've danced on bars, unfortunately. But yes, that's it.
Unfortunately, and I'm sure lots of conversations and stories that will come with that. I have a 26th birthday that I think I spent on top of a table somewhere in London. So, you know, you're keeping good company.
The only good thing is no social media back then, Nozipho. So
no. Listen, I've got a physical picture in an album. So whatever the story is what I tell it to be. Everybody else just needs to go with that narrative. But I just want to say a couple of hellos to a few people who've joined us. Florence says, I'm here. I'm from Johannesburg. Nompumelelo says, hey. And of course, Natasha Jacobs, who we both know. So Tash says, here are my fellow former CNBC Africa sisters. I'm watching all the way from Amsterdam, and I love seeing you together. Lerato Pelani, lovely to see you. Kim, who's actually Eleni's producer, managed to find us, and she says she's all of the above and always. And that is
the hurricane. It's her. She's the one that gave me that name.
Oh my gosh, we love you, Kim. And Prakshana, thank you for being here. Prakshana says, I'm from South Africa, and it's such a pleasure to meet you all. So, Eleni, you know, when we started the masterclass series, I was very clear. I only wanted to speak to 15 people, 15 South Africans in particular, that I feel have something to gift us as a nation as we think about what does it mean to lead yourself? What does it mean to lead other people? And how have you taken that from a theoretical answer that you would give to actually just making it practical? What does it look like for Eleni? So where I wanted to start, Eleni, is I wanted to clarify something. I got so many calls, guys, about, Nozi, you broke the rules. You said South Africans. And I'm like, excuse me, I know she might look like a global citizen. She might come across as a global citizen, but Eleni is as South African as it gets. So take us back to your heritage and your roots. Who's Eleni Jokos?
Yeah, you know, I get this question all the time, and people ask me, like, what are you? Where are you from? What are you, you know? Listen, I was born in Greece. I was born on a tiny little island, and my parents moved to South Africa when I was 4 years old. And I'd never been back to Greece until I was 25. I had to take a loan out because I wanted to meet my grandparents. Sure. So when I left for Greece to go on this trip, I thought I was going to find a bit of myself. And I thought, and I was always like, kind of like, what am I? Who am I? Am I Greek? Am I South African? What's my identity? And growing up in eMalahleni in Witbank, it doesn't really help you find your identity because it was very polarized and extremely racist. And we can get into some of that, right? Yes. I was, you know, ostracized in a bad way. And anyway, so I go to Greece, and then I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not Greek. I was like, I'm like identifying way more as a South African. And I was, you know, I was 24, 25 at the time, but I am South African. I grew up in South Africa. South Africa shaped my thoughts. It defines me. The people define me. The socioeconomic situations in South Africa define me. I look at everything, every story that I do through the South African lens. It is part of my being. It's part of my DNA. Yes, I live in Dubai now, but when I was in South Africa this weekend, by the way, and I arrived at OR Tambo and I saw the South African flag, you know, in tiles. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. I was filming it, and I got so emotional. The security came to me and said, "What are you filming?" And I was like, "The flag. This is now, you know, you've arrived." And I used to take that for granted, and I cried because I miss South Africa. I miss it so much because it is me, and I feel out of place every time I'm not home. I feel out of place.
Sure. So I want to talk a little bit about your South African superpowers, because I think we all have superpowers. But before we get to that, you talk about, one gets a sense that you've had to go on a journey of really finding your identity and squaring up and being confronted with the question of, what is my actual identity? And I know that you and I are just 2 years apart. And so we've grown up in really tough times in South Africa as the country was transitioning out of apartheid and into its democratic state. You talk about experiencing racism as well. I want you to take us to those moments, because somebody who doesn't have an appreciation for the South African experience might look at you and go, oh, but you're white. Right? What do you mean you experienced racism?
So thank you for this question. So one of the things that I've been grappling with, and I still actually do, I ask myself, you know, I'm white and I was born in a European country and I speak a European language. You know, what right do I have to say that I'm South African, or even be as connected to the African continent in the way that I am? And it's something that I really grapple with, and I've had deep conversations with my African friends about this. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the feedback that I get, it's like, Eleni, the love and the power and the passion and the storytelling you do for the African continent, we can see that you're one of us and you speak in that way. In fact, when I was in the Bahamas, I went to the Bahamas. I know I'm very lucky for a huge conference, an African conference. And yes. I was saying, we need to do this, and we, and Africa, and we, and I was using we. And then these African Americans came up to me and they said, I'm sorry, we have to ask you why you say we, because you're clearly not an African. And I said, I know that I don't look it. I might not be it, in terms of my birthplace, but I am it. I am African, and I feel it immensely. On the racism front, growing up in Witbank, it was a very horrible place. And I couldn't wait to get out of there. When we arrived in the 80s in Witbank, it was a time where I think a lot of people were leaving, especially white South Africans, especially Greek South Africans, by the way, were leaving because they were scared of what the, transitional sort of reality would be. And we went in, and I remember my dad telling us, and I was very young, saying, Eleni, you're going to see people that look different to you, but they are not different to you. And you must never forget that they are not different. And people are going to treat people differently and badly, and you must stand up for them. And I was like, what the hell is he talking about? And then I realized, okay, we look different in skin color. And we had this amazing man who worked at the Roadhouse that my dad was working at as well. And he could speak Greek. I think he was a Zulu guy. Sure. Spoke Greek perfectly. And he used to come and fetch us from the school. And imagine a black guy in the 80s fetching two young girls, my older sister and I, from school, holding our hands. So we were ostracized from the very beginning. Greek and Portuguese and Italians were also ostracized because we were never white enough for the other white kids. We were constantly being told that we weren't white. So it's like we didn't experience racism to the extent that the black kids experienced, which was absolutely catastrophic and harrowing. We were just ostracized and kind of treated like other. So there was different distinctions of it. But because I saw it so intensely, it was something that I was very cognizant of. And then that's also something that affected me in terms of figuring out what is my identity and where am I from? Can I claim my South Africanness and my Africanness being a Greek European?
And I think that's beautiful, because it sounds like you've not only had to do or have the conversation with self first, but it's also given you the vocabulary to help others to understand the nuances of the South African identity story, because it's not as simple as black and white. There were many other races, and many other experiences oftentimes get lost in the telling of that story, because we try to simplify it to make it just a story about black people and or white people. Your first experience of leadership, what was the first time you look at something, you saw leadership and said, that's leadership? And I ask this question because I also know that there's an experience where we can look at things and go, that's definitely not leadership. And I don't want to lead myself in that way. So the question really is, what was your first encounter with leadership, good or bad?
I want to dig a little bit into this one in sort of a very granular way and think about my experience with my 7-year-old daughter now, where I see her leadership skills coming out. And it kind of reminded me of when I was a kid. And I remember I really grappled with the fact that there were leaders at a young age where, boys and girls would try and take over the group and dictate how people were playing. And I remember I always wanted to be the leader, and I never had the opportunity to because of various factors, right? Because of some of the ostracizing of being Greek and whatever. And, I wasn't cool enough, I wasn't hip enough or whatever. And I remember grappling with this. It's like, how do I become a leader? And if you start looking at all these trends, right, within your life and your family home, your mother takes leadership. And I think we don't give our mothers enough credit for the leadership they take when they put food on the table, and when we didn't have enough to eat, that my mother would always make a plan, or that our parents would hold us close when stuff was going wrong from an economic perspective. And, that's the kind of leadership that you maybe take for granted. And as you get older and you hit work, and then you see toxic leadership and it's blatant, it stares you in the face, and that it's not the right way to lead people, because actually leading people is not just about trying to get them as productive and efficient as possible. It's about keeping them happy to want to do it. And when I started being in toxic work environments, I said, I don't want this. I don't want to have these people around me. This is not normal to feel scared and to feel paranoid by being people. And I think it's like, if you speak to your employees and they feel scared of you, or they feel paranoid, or they feel worried to make a mistake, you're doing something wrong on leadership? Are you amplifying your employees and the people around you, or are you diminishing them? And those two things for me are really important. And that pertains to how your kids are with friends. You know, sometimes you've got friends that diminish your child's personality. Sometimes you've got friends that amplify it. And I think leadership comes from a very young age where you start to notice these things. And then you ask, what am I? Where do I fall in all of this?
Yeah. And there's a couple of things I don't want to lose in what you've said. The first one being the home is probably, the family is probably the first frame of leadership that we get. And it gives us the language to be able to say that's leadership and that's not leadership. And I love how you've elevated the women, mothers, grandmothers in our lives who often are actually our first example of leadership, because we see them leading in different contexts. And I think that's important. You've mentioned the idea of being an amplifier and not a diminisher. And of course, I recognize that because it comes from Liz Wise. I think she wrote the book.
Yes,
exactly. Wiseman. Yes, that's right. She wrote the book. I think it's called Amplifiers and Diminishers. I could be wrong.
I remember, but you know, when I read this thing, I was like, oh my gosh. And I read it a while back, right? So this whole amplifying, diminishing thing, it's exactly what I felt, but I didn't know how to verbalize it. And she just put it into the best format in understanding.
And I want to blurb it for others who might not have read this book, because it's so powerful. And as you're speaking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, here's another connection point for us. And basically, Liz Wiseman basically says you can be an amplifier in people's lives, or you can be a diminisher. You can be the person who builds on people's ideas and makes them feel good about being the originator of the idea, or you can become the person who cancels out other people's ideas so that they're your own ideas and you take the credit for those ideas. So it's definitely such a beautiful book that's not directly about leadership, but is very much about leadership.
But don't you think, Nazi, and I'm asking you this question, right? It's leadership is everywhere, right? The people around you, the way your parents are around you, the way your husband is around you, your kid, it's all of that. It's like leading from within. But then how do you lead yourself? And I think that's one of the most tough questions, right? Because it's easy to just kind of tag along and listen to other leaders around you. But you've got to then ask yourself at some point in your life, and that happened to me at a young age, how do I want to lead myself to get to where I want to be? And where is it that I want to go? Because no one's going to come and lead me to a place that I want to be. I have to lead myself there.
So as you can see, guys, she warned me. She was like, Nozi, I'm a journalist. I'm going to ask you questions. Please don't think that this is just going to be one way. And I love that. And I love that question, because I think we first start leading ourselves based on the blueprints that we see around us. We gravitate towards people that represent something better. We might not know what that better is, but we aspire to certain people and we mimic their behaviors. We mimic their language. And I think for me personally, it was definitely mimicking my mother. She was an absolute, you know, when you say hurricane and tsunami, I feel like you're describing my mother. Absolute hurricane, absolute tsunami. And she, through observing her, I learned that because of the conditions where I was, in the way that I was raised, in the absolute poverty that I grew up in, that the only way to lead myself out of that place was to lead like her. And I needed to, and it's something that was, nobody had to teach me that. It kind of landed, and I really knew in that moment that that's what gets me from here to there. I might lead differently now. I hope I do, because I don't want to be a hurricane and a tsunami all the time. Sometimes it's necessary, but it's definitely how I learned to lead myself. And with feedback, which I've got an uncomfortable relationship with, especially negative feedback and criticism, I've learned to lead myself better. But
yeah, it's so hard, like the feedback thing. And it's also the point of like validation that I personally need, right? Because of the environment that I grew up in. I don't know if you want me to take you through some of that.
Let's talk about that, because television is a hard place where it comes with a very different sort of dynamic. And I'm keen to hear how you've navigated that space.
So, I mean, and it's a really fascinating one, and one that I've now started to appreciate more than I did. So we're 4 daughters, and we had a little shop in the coal mining towns in eMalahleni. It was a really tough life. And it's so funny because when I meet people now, they go, wow, you look like you come from old cash. I'm like, no.
Greek aristocracy.
I do not. But thank you. And it was really difficult. It was really hard because I used to go every weekend to my dad's shop and help him with the food and, you know, the selling and, you know, whatever. And I remember once my dad, you know, there were no cell phones then, right? It was like in the 90s. And my dad went, it was Tavistock Mine, which is now shut down. My dad went to go do something. He says, Eleni, you're handling the shop. And I was like, okay. And I think I might have been about 11.
Sure.
And Coca-Cola arrives for a delivery. And the guy comes and he's like, okay, how many Cokes do you need? How many Iron Brew, you know, whatever, like what's the stock? And I'm like, what does he normally get? So he's like, don't worry, let me sort this out. So then he gives me the invoice and it says COD. So I said, okay, thank you. My dad will pay you. Whatever. He says, no, it's COD. And I was like, what's COD? He's like, cash on delivery. So I'd open the tills and I take money out and I give this guy money. Then my dad comes and he screams at me and he said, bad decision because I need to pay the Stuyvesant guys because the cigarettes are coming. So I remember in that moment, it's like all these things, right, that affect you and impact you. And, you know, you built, and I remember at the time I was traumatized, but actually when I think back, it's all those things that kind of built on who I was. And it impacted the way I thought about life and seeing the coal miners and seeing how hard they worked and seeing the dirty money that they would pull out. And I remember asking my dad, what do they do? Why is their money dirty? And I was like asking probing questions. And I just sat reading newspapers and I had no idea what was going on, but it was actually without knowing, it was the very foundation that created the Eleni today. It was that being observant and being plunged into difficulty that created who I am today.
So I think that's really powerful. I want to come back to the question of validation because I think that's a different conversation. But I think what you just said is so powerful, where you talk about being in a difficult environment, but that environment preparing you for the work that you're doing today. And you're reminding me of the book that Ryan Holiday has written, and the book is called The Struggle is the Way. And Ryan basically says, in the absence of struggle, we don't get to our best selves. My question to you, Eleni, is that if you think about your upbringing in your childhood and the struggles that you had there, would you redo, replace, take away any of that? Because I would guess that a lot of what helps you survive the pressure and the environment that you're operating at is because of that.
You know, this is it. You know, these are tough questions, Nozipho. I thought we were going to. Okay, good one. Actually, if you had asked me in my 20s, I would have been like, I wish I came from money and we had money, and I wish we didn't have issues going to school, and we had enough, we didn't have to walk to school, and we didn't have a problem with lifts. And I mean, we didn't have to push cars every morning to get to school. And I wish we had a more loving home, you know, immigrant parents. My parents never hugged us and told us they loved us. That didn't exist in the house. You know, there were so many things that I just hated about the way that I grew up, and the aggressiveness and the resentments and stuff like that. But now, I think in the last 7 years since I had my daughter, I wouldn't change a thing. And I'll tell you why, because actually it's dawned on me that the very struggle that I had to deal with in my teen years, that I thought I was dying from emotional pain and physical pain, is actually what's made me who I am. But that comes with negative stuff as well. It's not all like, oh, well, I struggled and I'm great now and look at me and I'm like, got a house in Dubai and it's all, you know, rosy. The problem with that struggle and that poverty, right, the struggle, is that you're always afraid that you're going to fall back into it. And you always have insecurities, and you're searching for validation. And you're always waiting for people to tell you you're good enough, because you actually fundamentally believe that you're not good enough. Because how in the world did that little girl in a shop in eMalahleni get to CNN? How is this physically possible? How is it actually mentally, rationally doable? Like, what the hell? How the hell did I do it? Because my parents didn't have resources. We didn't have money to go to university. We didn't have any of that. So how the hell did it happen? So because that weighs on you, you're filled with gratitude, which is great, because I'm always grateful at CNN, right? I'm so grateful. I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you. But actually at some point, it's like you should own the space. And I actually have not reached a point where I feel like I truly own the space, that I truly deserve, that I feel like I deserve what I've got. I always have to try and prove that I actually should be here today. And it's It's my fight internally that I have every single day.
I want to talk about that a little bit more, because I think the resonance for me is so high. My husband had to remind me that I'm not poor anymore, because growing up poor, I am not the person who's going to be splurging on things. So the rule we have in our marriage is that whenever we go on holiday, the only thing I'm allowed to book are the flights, because the cheaper the flight, nobody's going to complain as long as it gets us there. But I'm not allowed to book accommodation. I'm not allowed to book experiences, because I'm going to try and book the cheapest thing possible that oftentimes takes away from the experience from us. And he sat me down one day and he said, I know where you come from. I know what you've been through.
Yeah.
I need you to know that you're not that person anymore. So the reason I raise this, and I don't know why I'm getting emotional now, I'm the person asking the questions here. The reason why I'm asking this is that as you think about how hard you've had to be to get to where you are, do you feel that even today you still have to be that same person? Or do you feel that you've earned enough room and space to be gentler with yourself, to be kinder to yourself, and to give yourself more room to make mistakes, to fail, and to not always have it together? It's really also getting emotional. This has been a bit ridiculous now.
No, I think because I have to, I've done a lot of self-work, because I needed to shake the stuff that happened to me when I was a teenager in my 20s. And I needed to change my mindset and my mentality of abundance. And it's really hard when you know what it's like to not eat or to not have enough, to then go, I can splurge and I can get out of poverty mindset. And poverty mindset is not just about things, right? It's not about clothes and jewelry and whatever. It's not only that. It's the fear of getting back into it. It's a fear of losing it. And then poverty mindset is the fear of you not being enough as well. You're poverty stricken from within. While I know that no one can question how hard I've worked, because God knows I've put in the hours. I've done the hard work. They cannot question, my commitment and my passion and my love for what I do. But I always wonder, can they question if I'm good enough to do what I do? And that sometimes like creeps up on me when I don't have a good show, or when I'm tired, or when I'm feeling a bit vulnerable. I've got good people around me in my life, like my producer, Kim, for example, who keeps on reminding me. And she says, you're really irritating, because why do you feel insecure sometimes? And I think it actually comes with the job. Most of the anchors and correspondents I've met in various companies do have this thing of vulnerability, because we don't want to fail, right? So that kind of creeps in. But I know that it's because of my struggle growing up. And I also worry, my accent is South African. I'm on a global network. My accent will always be South African. Am I good enough to be on a global network with this accent? And it's like all these things that play in your mind, and you just have to like shut the door and say, I'm good enough. I deserve to be here. God is with me. I've done the work. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. I want to talk about God in a moment, because I do think it's a big differentiator whether you feel that you've got God or not,
Yes.
in helping you get from here to there. I also want to say, if you have questions for Eleni, please feel free. I'll try and integrate them as much as possible. This is the first time I've cried on the masterclass series, and I don't know why, but I really feel like we are getting into a conversation that I think most leaders are not going to give us the depth in this conversation. One of the things you've touched on, and I want to double click on that. So I want to talk about public failure, because if you're having a bad show, that's a public failure. That's not a failure on the inside, failure in the corner, failure in the dark. That's a public failure with everybody watching. I remember when I joined CNBC, the hardest thing for me to do was watch myself on air. I'm a lot better about it now. Like, I can watch myself, but I used to cringe at the idea that I would see something wrong, that I would hear a pronunciation of a word that wasn't right, or I would see a hair out of place or something, or I think, oh, that was not a good way of asking the question. I could have asked that better. I want to understand your relationship with failure. I'll start with mine. So as a way of maybe giving you permission to talk about yours as well. I hated everything about Brene Brown when I first came across her. All of the stuff about vulnerability, letting people see you fully, scars and all. And then of course, you know, I'm in the space of conversations and everybody used to talk about you got to fail fast, fail forward. And I used to think, I don't want to fail anyway. So don't talk to me about failing fast or failing forward. Thank you very much. I'm going to stay right here, well prepared, perfect, doing the best I can and being the best at what I can do. I've had to do a lot of work to let go and to put down some of those fears around failing. How does Eleni Giokos, who is, in my view, literally at the pinnacle of broadcasting, when you're having a bad day, when you're having a bad show, when you ask a question that you think, oh, as the words leave your mouth, you already know.
Like, you're like, why? What? Why?
What was that? How do you deal with failure?
You know, there's different tiers of failure, right? So there's failure like sitting on the desk at CNN and asking, or any network, and asking a really stupid question. We're like, why? Why did you do that? Like, why did you ask this way? And then you like berate yourself. But by then, the person that you're speaking to has already finished his answer and you have no idea what they said. Now you don't even know what to ask next. So you get into this big thing. But I think it was a lot more prominent when I was younger. And I remember at CNBC when I was working there at the time, you know, in my 20s, and I made mistakes doing that video wall that Bronwyn Nielsen used to make me ad-lib. And let me tell you, the reason that I became a strong journalist is because of Bronwyn Nielsen making me ad-lib that whole video wall, back to front to back, constantly. And then I'd get so nervous and I'd mess it up. And I remember driving home, screaming and crying in the car, calling myself names. But I was like in my 20s, right? Yeah. And then I started to be like, okay, how can I do this better? What do I need to do? And then, you know, starting to like be kinder to myself, to not, because once you get into this thing of like, I'm a failure, you're going to fail and fail and fail consistently. Yeah. So when I fail at that level where it's like an immediate stumble or reading badly or having low energy or asking a stupid question, it's like, I've got to pick myself up and move on. And one of the things that helped me with not failing at that level when I'm anchoring is very good preparation. Yeah. So when you're very well prepared, when you're reading and you're studying the stuff and you know your stuff, it's like, even if you stumble, you still know your stuff. There's a thing of credibility that comes from within you that, like, even if you stumble and you say something slightly stupid, but you know your stuff, so that the failure doesn't feel as bad. I don't know how to explain that to you. Yeah. And then I want to talk about other levels of failure, and maybe we can talk about how I got into this industry. When I was younger, I had more, I'll leave you to speak for a bit, but when I was younger, I knew there was no room for failure. So we can maybe talk about that in a bit, but I want to know how you feel when you're on stage and you say something you shouldn't, and now you're getting paid for your gig, and now you're like, oh dear. But you're perfect. Every time I see you, I've never seen you fluff. I'm like, how does she do it?
So let me tell you, and it's not going to be a popular response because it's exactly what you've said. If you know how to back it up because you know what you're talking about, you can come back from any failure. And what I've learned half the time is that the person that I'm engaging, the panel, the audience, probably don't even realize that according to my standards, oh, I could have done that better. I could have asked that question better. And the only way to come back from that is being prepared. And if you're not prepared, you're going to sink deeper. It's like quicksand, right? You're just going to sink deeper and deeper and deeper. And so my relationship with failure has been about, okay, that wasn't great. And then keep it moving and to move on. And I just want to pause for a moment to also acknowledge Bronwyn Nielsen, because I think that there are few women we don't pause. Bronwyn mentored me from A to Z. And there are few women we don't pause to acknowledge. And she was absolutely instrumental in getting me to be the person that I am today and to be able to be the kind of conversation strategist that I am today. But to the question of failure, unfortunately, there's no sexy answer. There's no quick fix around. There's no workaround. Your bounce back and your resilience from failure is directly correlated to the extent to which you are prepared. And the more ill prepared you are, the more you're going to sink from that failure, because you have nothing to hold you up and to pull you back up. It's not a sexy answer, but
it's true. It's preparation. And you and I have spoken about hard work before, but I also just want to say this and caveat that answer. You know, at CNN, we do a million different geopolitical stories in 2-hour blocks, right? I can't know everything about everywhere. I can't know everything at any one point. Sometimes there's a breaking news line that comes in and I'm like, I don't even know where that country is on the map.
Where's this place?
You know? And in that moment, let me tell you, because you could really fail badly in that moment if you suddenly have to ask and sound like an authority on a topic you absolutely don't know, and they've suddenly given you the Minister of Finance to interrogate it further. In that moment, you have to rely on firstly, your experience, your instinct, and the context you already have about other countries that sound similar to this. Yeah. And then you have to go simple. And when you go simple, and I think this also is something that you can use in your boardrooms or with people. It's like, trust yourself and say, if I just met this human and I know that this breaking news line has just come out and I have no idea about this, what would I actually ask? Because frankly, if you don't know, I can guarantee you the audience has no clue. So it's just about trusting yourself in that moment. And I don't do it all the time, but it's actually like trusting yourself. Trusting myself is something that I'm still working on.
So there's something I want to build on that, because I think going simple is something that's missed a lot. Because I think to give yourself permission to go simple first requires that you give yourself permission to be humble in that moment. Yeah. And I always say that when I train executives or train journalists and other people who want to be conversation strategists, I always say, the minute you don't know something and you try to cover it up with big words and fancy business school speak and boardroom talk, everybody knows that you do not know what you're talking about. But if you allow yourself the space to say, I don't know, but I will know by the end of this conversation. And in order to know, I have to go simple. I have to go to the basics, because that's what everybody needs to hear. So I love that you've given us, I've always just thought about it in the context of humility, but I think I'm adding another building block on the back of what you've just shared with us, which to say it is about humility gives you permission for simplicity. Guys, don't steal that. I feel like that's going to be a great line. Don't steal that.
I love that. Humility gives you the permission for simplicity, but you know, it's like the trusting yourself thing. It's how much do you trust yourself? And I think leadership really is something about trusting your views, your ideas, your decisions. And trusting yourself doesn't come that easy, by the way. You know, maybe it does for you guys. Maybe I'm the outlier here and I'm weird. I don't know. But trusting myself is a big thing, you know, and I constantly have to be like, okay, I've got to trust my decision. And it's something that keeps on coming up in my career. I don't know do you trust yourself? I can see you cringing a bit there.
I think I'm cringing because I think I've never thought about that question, because I think the question always comes in a one-sided way. People don't talk about self-trust. They talk about self-belief. And they talk about believing in yourself, which is very different, because trusting yourself starts with self-validation, that my experiences matter, that what I've seen in the world matters, that what I have to say is important, and that it matters. And so whatever I'm going to contribute right now, I'm going to trust that even if it's not correct, it will have a valuable input to the conversation and where we're going. And I just think that is absolutely brilliant.
Can I add something to that? Do you think the people that book you to put you on stage, do they go, you know, we believe in her? They go, we trust her. We trust that she's going to, you know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying. That's a totally different thing. They might believe in you, but they trust you. And that's the trust you need to bring to yourself from an inner space of like full trust, of the trust that people give you to put you on TV or to put you on stage. Do you have that trust for yourself? You know, even in a boardroom, do you have that trust to be that manager or the executive in your company?
I think it's a brilliant invitation to all of us listening today. And that is, over and above belief, do you trust yourself? And how do you build that inner trust? How does Eleni build the inner trust? How have you come to a point? Yeah, you know, I'm going to flip this on you. How have you arrived at a point where, like you can broadcast to 1 million people and trust that what you have to say doesn't always have to be correct? Because I don't think this is about being correct, but it's worth listening to. Like you have something valuable to say.
So I'm going to disappoint everyone. A lot of it is preparation. So it's like, it's preparation, showing up in the right energy, the right format, knowing, you know, really dissecting things. I think I overthink things. And actually my team will tell you the same thing. I overthink things in a way that a lot of people don't, I think, in this industry. And I really overthink. And because of my overthinking, it's good and bad, but it does cause for preparation. The other thing that I do is I meditate. And meditation gives me clarity of mind. And that's really important, to have a clear mind in terms of, you know, having a blank sheet of paper to be able to trust myself. The other thing is that I try and remember the incredible interviews. I've done thousands of interviews in my life. I've been on air for thousands of hours. I don't even know how many people. I don't even remember everyone I've interviewed. I need to trust that the context that I've built is ready and waiting in my mind to apply to all sorts of situations that I have. And actually, you don't have to have interviewed thousands of people for that context. Your context is the way that you brought up, the things that your mom and dad have said to you, your experiences in your 20s. I don't know how old everyone is. Your building context is building trust within yourself. And then really believing that you're supposed to be where you are. And I mean, that's kind of how I do it on a day-to-day basis, because again, it's tiered. There's a daily thing of trusting myself. There's a monthly, there's a yearly thing. It's like I look back and, you know, for me, emotion is very much part of what I do. How do I feel? Am I tired? Have I slept enough? Have I gotten enough feedback? Why haven't I? Well, these are stories I want to be doing. You know, am I doing what I really love? And it's like that all affects my mood and the way that I think about my life. And that affects the levels of trust that I have and the level of confidence. I don't want to get too deep. I'm sorry that we're getting into very ethereal things here, but this really is just what makes me who I am. You know?
So I love that you're giving us practical ingredients here, and I wouldn't have it any other way. There's two things I want to lift up. One is just, you know, when you talk about, I'm meant to be here. That's okay. I'm going to move on from that because I'm getting emotional again. So I'm going to come back.
I wake up in the morning and I'm like, Eleni, you're meant to be here. This is what you're meant to be doing. And I'm like mantra, because you have to repeat some things to yourself that you don't ultimately believe sometimes. And I really suggest that people do that. I think, you know, we forget about, I think when people reach a certain level of success is that they forget to do the self-work on themselves mentally. But I want to say this, the people that I've interviewed, the billionaires, the successful people, none of them are pessimists. All of them are optimistic. All of them are willing to take risks, and all of them speak to themselves kindly, and they have ultimate faith and belief and trust in everything that they do. It is unbelievable. I mean, they are the mountain in the storm, right? They cannot be moved. And that's what I take cue from, is to become truly successful. They're not whining and complaining and going, oh, I'm not good enough. Like, should I be doing this? Do I belong here? They believe ultimately that they should be doing what they're doing, and they're doing it, and they're ultimately successful.
And that's really a powerful place to be able to connect with. I'm meant to be here. I'm meant to be doing what I'm doing in this moment. My husband always says, we are the sum total of all the places that we've been. Just like a river, every experience counts, even the moments where you felt like you were standing still. Yeah. And I never lose sight of that. I do want to be a little bit unpopular again. And that is, I want to talk about hard work and how it seems to have gotten a bad rep. And what I mean by this, Eleni, is that you've been at CNN for 10 years. My goodness, that's 10 years. I have been on global stages for 10 years. And if there's one thing that is a consistent for me, is that the people that I have observed being at the very top of their game put in the work.
They do.
And that means that their personal operating model, their day, if you just look at a snapshot of their day, looks very different from somebody who's not where they are. So the question to you is, What's a typical day for Eleni? And what does Eleni think and feel? What's your relationship with hard work?
I love it so much. It makes me tick. I'm not called a tsunami and hurricane for nothing. Because can you imagine? I walk in, I'm like, guys, we need to do this. You get on that, I'll get on this, and I love hard work so much. And actually, that's what got me to where I am today. It's hard work. Yeah, talent. I don't know what the ratio is of how much hard work versus talent versus passion versus whatever mindset. But for me, my life has been defined by hard work, and I do not run away from it. I'm not afraid of it, and I love to jump right into it. It's a day-to-day thing for me. I don't know what my schedule will look like. That's the one thing that troubles my family, is that I have no routine, which affects my daughter. But generally, if I know that I've got something coming up, I will read intensely. I will be watching CNN. I'll be watching other channels and writing notes. I have 4 or 5 different books that I'm reading at one time. It's just like, that's the hard work. And then I do hard work at home. Like, I love to cook and I love to spend time. So it's like, I'm so intense, and I think I do need to drop it down a notch. But this whole notion of like, you need to relax and have balance and go for coffee with your friends and chill, I don't know what that is. And in fact, I hear it from the younger generation a lot, and I really envy them, because I hope they get what they want. But I can tell you now, that's never going to define my life, and it's not what I'm looking for. And I think that the notion of balance, I can say that maybe I'll work really hard for a month and I'm exhausted, and then maybe I'll take it slightly easier the next month. And on the net over a year, there's kind of balanced, but it's definitely more geared to hard work. But I love it. A lot of people don't, but for me, it drives me.
You're reminding me of, we had the Auditor General of South Africa on one of the early episodes of the Masterclass series, Tsakani Maluleke, and she said the one thing that has always been a constant in her life is she knows that she can outwork anyone. And I just, I loved that, because it's not a weapon that we see, and that we are proud to be able to hold out and to say, come what may, I'll outwork anyone.
Outwork you, exactly. Yeah. I'm stealing that. So many good quotes.
I know, I love that. I absolutely love that. But we've got a couple of minutes, about 10 minutes, and I don't want to go without talking about family and motherhood as well. You have a 7-year-old daughter.
Yes.
I spoke to you 24 hours ago, and you were in Cape Town. We're having a conversation now, and you're in Dubai. And that's a life that's not too unfamiliar to me in terms of just the hecticness and the travel and all of that. What kind of conversations have you had to have with yourself as a mother to allow yourself to love your work and to love your daughter, to love your husband, to love your family, even though you cannot be with everybody and be everything to everyone 100% of the time?
I mean, it's so hard. If I didn't have my mom when I first gave birth to Cleo, and I was in South Africa at the time, and I had to go back after 12 weeks, I think I wouldn't have made it. So the family support was important, but the conversations I have with myself, really difficult ones, because I feel very guilty, and I know she needs me and she misses me. So what I do is, probably everyone that's watching is probably going to be like, bad mom. I co-sleep with my kid. I sleep with my daughter. And I bond with her at night because I'm working so many hours. I have conversations with her about what I do. And I think that fundamentally, if I wasn't doing this, if I didn't have this job and I was just doing something else that I didn't really enjoy, I wouldn't be a good mother. I think this makes me a better mother, because I understand things very differently. The travel is very hard, Nozipho, you know this. It's so hard. It breaks me. She was crying today. I had to leave the holiday out in Greece early to come and work. And she's so used to the disappointment, and that's what I do. I keep on disappointing her. But I'm hoping that maybe, because we spoke about struggle makes the man, right? That guy you were talking about. Yeah. Maybe this is going to be my daughter's struggle, because our kids need to struggle in some way to become brilliant. And I can tell you now, she's not going to have a monetary struggle. What's her struggle going to be? Is it me that's going to be her struggle? If that, at least I can manage that struggle in a way that it's not going to completely scar her. But it's a tough one. But having a child was the biggest joy of my life and the best thing I've ever done. Out of everything I've done, it's her.
And I asked this question to everyone, this following question, everybody we've had on the masterclass. Funny funnily enough, with the exception of Tebe Ikalafeng, have all been married. And the question I always ask is, has it mattered who you've married in terms of giving you the space and the fuel to be you?
Yes. My husband, George, is one of the most amazing humans. He is one of my biggest advocates, supporters. When I come home and I cry because I haven't had a good show, he's the one that reminds me of my brilliance, even though I don't really know my brilliance. He's, you know, and because he's very different to me, he's not the tsunami. He's like the sunshine on a calm day. He's a very different energy to me. And I think that if I had to marry a tsunami, it would be dramatic. Yeah. But I didn't marry someone like him with his personality that's more grounded. He's an engineer. He's a lot more rational. I'm irrational. I'm crazy. I leave stuff around. He's completely different, but he also gives me the support and he gives me the space and he's not jealous. So I travel all the time. He doesn't say a word and he's my biggest advocate and he's probably watching right now. My biggest advocate. And I'm so grateful that I have this man in my life because he's changed everything for me. And actually my career really grew exponentially when I got together with him when I was 25. We've been together since I was 20. I'm 42 now. So this man has seen it all and he's been there through it all. And in fact, he was the one, I'm not going to mention which company he told me to leave. You know it. He was the one who said to me, if you don't resign and leave, this is not going to work. He said, because what you're going through and feeling is not normal. You shouldn't be in a toxic environment. So he's amazing. Shout out to George.
Sure. Shout out to George. Kim is also saying George is the best. We are all so lucky. So shout out to George. I almost feel that we need to come up with 10 questions to ask your future husband before you say yes, because I think in hindsight, maybe some of those questions are about that. You know, when I travel, what will you do? How will you support? And we oftentimes miss these things. Tulani says, Eleni, how does one avoid external or the need for external validation, especially when you're in the process of building trust for yourself?
It's really hard. You know, I think sometimes it goes hand in hand that the external validation helps you build trust. But then the flip side of that is the criticism. Does that then erode the trust? You know, and you have to take both. Peter Ndoro, who's my other amazing mentor, I love him so deeply. He used to say to me, take everything with a pinch of salt, the good and the bad, because the truth is somewhere in the middle. And he always used to say to me, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And if you can, you know, understand that all the good stuff and all the bad stuff that comes your way is really just a view, a perspective. It's about how you feel about yourself. Then you can get to where you want to be on the building trust perspective. But I think we've got 6 minutes. Can I tell you? Listen, we've got 6 minutes. I quickly want to say this, and I want to leave this with like a high note, okay? Because one thing we didn't say is how the hell I got to CNN. And I think take us to the beginning. I want to leave it with magic, with just magic. Okay. So here's Eleni going to the shop in Witbank, coal mining town, disastrous environment. Everyone's like, I mean, I can't even tell you what I saw at school. In my mind, I used to lie on the bed and I used to daydream with the Eleni walking out with big shopping bags out of Sandton, which I'd never been to. And I just saw it on TV. And I used to manifest and daydream and daydream. When I went to university, I was studying art. And it was too expensive for me to finish fine arts and graphic. In fact, that's my painting over there.
Oh, wow.
I studied fine arts and graphic design. So I took my theory subjects. I was waitressing to go through university. And in that moment where I stopped doing my practical because it was too expensive, I walked past the sign that said Tuks FM, DJ and news presenter applications now. And I was like, it's like God spoke to me in that moment. I got goosebumps. I had a physical reaction to that sign. And I went up and I applied and I got my first job. And I didn't even think about journalism as a career at that time. All I knew is that I wanted to do well. And I had no room for failure. And the reason I had no room for, we're talking about failure, I had no room for failure because I needed to support my mom and dad. I needed to put my sisters through school and I needed to put food on the table for myself. So for me, there was no room. I did not take no for an answer at any point from that moment on. And then I remember when CNBC came to Africa and opened the South African branch, I had the same physical reaction to that announcement. And I phoned the HR guy and he said to me, but you've got no experience. And I said, trust me, you need me. And I went and I saw him in the parking lot and I begged him and he gave me an interview. And then they didn't want to give me the job because I knew nothing about finance. And then I said, but listen, if you give me a 3-month contract and I fail, I would have given up my job at YFM and you would have lost 3 months salary. I got the job, and look at that, like not taking no for an answer and believing in the process and not allowing for failure is what got me to where I am. And I'm so grateful. I'm so eternally grateful.
And the hurricane and the tsunami landed. I mean, that's just come so alive. One day I'll tell you the story of how I saw a poster on a wall on the back of a hotel that said, the office of the president is looking for interns. And I had an Eleni moment. And that's how my career started.
But that's the thing. It's like we don't listen to those moments. We don't listen to the physical reaction. You know, when we get physical reactions about things, we need to listen. Something's going on. There's something greater within you, and knowing that perhaps we're ignoring. And that also comes with trust and believing. And there's so much stuff happening on the sidelines. And I hope that with people listening to this, they must understand that it's not just me and you feeling this way. Some of the greatest minds in the world trust their instinct and listen to their bodies and listen to their moments of like epiphany that might be happening.
And that yes is all around you, and it's about being able to tune into it. I mean, in fact, if anybody's listening to this, there's a professor called Professor Martin Banda, and he's from Malawi. Sorry, it's Martin Kalunga Banda. Kalunga, as I'm saying it phonetically, Banda. And I had the privilege of being in a lecture that he gave at Said, which is Oxford Business School. And he spoke about the ability of leading into your next, leading yourself into your next. And he says, you will hear it when the next step needs to be taken, because the yes will be in your body. It won't be an external auditory source. You will feel it in your body and you'll know that's what you need to do next. He's got this exact talk on YouTube and completely changed my life. And it's the reason why I'm a conversation, or part of the reason why I'm a conversation strategist today. Last question before I let you go.
Yeah.
God is with me. I know that you are a person of great faith. I know you take spirituality very seriously. My final question to you tonight is, how have you integrated your faith in your practice of leading yourself so that faith doesn't become something that's ethereal and out there, but something that is really tangible in your life?
It's in everything I do, and everything when I wake up in the morning, I pray. When I go to sleep, and then in terms of the way that I lead myself, I always ask, am I being kind to myself in the way that God would be or Jesus would be, and how do they view me? And I sometimes have these deep sort of moments, but I think in macro terms is that if you're not walking alone, the walk feels so much more powerful, and you're heading towards where you need to be, because you're not walking alone. And that's like one of the most incredible things that happened to me at a young age, that I was always very spiritual, but I think as I get older, it's not dissipating, because I think for some people it kind of goes away a little, but for me it's even stronger in my life now than ever before. And I feel the presence even more so, because I feel so protected. And in those moments of vulnerability, that's when I find my strength and power, through him, through spirituality.
I absolutely love that. In the moments of vulnerability, the tough ones, the hard ones, that's where you find your strength and power. Before I let you go, there are a couple of books we mentioned. We spoke about Liz Wiseman, Amplifiers. I think the book is called Amplifiers. We spoke about Ryan Holiday and The Struggle is the Way. I haven't missed anything else. And we spoke about Dr. Martin
Banda. I wrote it down.
That is definitely something that is definitely worth watching. And with that, let me say this to my dear friend, to my dear sister. thank you.
Thank you so much.
You have been phenomenal. You have taken the question of leadership, you've made it real, you've made it accessible, you've decoded it, and you've put it in the hands of thousands of people who are going to be watching this conversation. We are eternally grateful for you, and I am eternally grateful for you. Thank you for your time, Eleni. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nazi. I hope to see you soon on stage.
Soon. I'm going to see you in Abidjan in a couple of weeks. Cheers. Thank you so much. Cheers. Bye, everybody.
Bye.